Another NASCAR Cup Series team is about to announce their 2025 driver lineup, but who is it and where does everybody shake out in this wild, silly season?
High, push it, checker flag, hell yeah!
What's the caution for? Me?
Can I not push it in?
Stop anybody.
Come on, he's going! Way to go, boys! One hell of a job, man, one hell of a job. Thank you so much.
Hey gearheads, and welcome back on into Shifting Gears. It is going to be a wild one. We're talking about the 2025 NASCAR silly season driver team lineup, or at least the latest, and where all of these drivers and all of these teams could plug and play for next year, so to speak. And before we break it on down, we want to go ahead and send our thoughts and prayers to the entire Force family. John Force still hospitalized, unfortunately. They're deeply concerned about head trauma and a head injury that he sustained in the Virginia Nationals last weekend. We're thinking about you, John. Hopefully you're going to be making a full recovery, and we'll see you at the track very, very soon. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the entire John Force Racing family, as well as the family itself. Now, before we get into it, make sure that you mash that subscribe button so that you do not miss a video. And of course, log on to arnrace.com for the latest motorsports news. ARN, the Motorsports Authority. There's a lot happening in the NASCAR Cup Series with the 2025 team driver rosters. The only thing we can really do is kind of go team by team and break down where everybody will be, who their drivers will be, and if there are any major changes, and what is official and what is not official as of the posting of this video. Let's go ahead and start with Hendrick Motorsports. No real changes. Larson in the 5, Chase Elliott in the 9, William Byron in the 24, and Alex Bowman in the 48, despite the rumors of Kyle Busch jumping into the 48. No, everybody's locked down for next year, and even some of those drivers are locked down for multi-years. No major changes over at Hendrick Motorsports. Now, looking at Joe Gibbs Racing, we already know that Martin Truex Jr. is going to be retiring at the end of this year, and we now know that Chase Briscoe is going to be jumping in the 19 car with Bass Pro and some other sponsors in there, but it is to be noted that Chase Briscoe said that of all the teams that he talked to, Joe Gibbs Racing was the only organization that didn't ask, hey, what sponsor dollars are you bringing on over? That's a massive, massive selling point, letting me know that they are more or less locked in and making the whole we couldn't find sponsorship for Kyle Busch very, very fishy. But Denny Hamlin is signed through at least next year, so no changes there. Christopher Bell signed through again at least next year. And Joe Gibbs is not going to fire his grandson Ty. I'd like to see Ty run the 18, even though next year all sources and signs indicate that he will be back in the 54 Toyota next year. Now, on the flip side of Joe Gibbs Racing 2311, we know Bubba Wallace is not signed for next year in the 23 Toyota, but we're expecting that he will sign with them. Tyler Reddick is signed through at least next year, no changes there. And we know that 2311 is acquiring one of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters, so there will be a third Toyota team over at 2311 next year. Now, who's in that Toyota? Lots of rumors. Firstly, what number? We're hearing the 50s being considered, the 67s being considered. They're kind of looking at all of their options right now and really looking at it from a brand marketing standpoint. The team already has a relationship with Monster Energy, so Riley Herbst is on the table. For some reason, that is kind of the big rumor that's out there right now, and I don't necessarily know if 2311 is going to turn into a pay-to-race facility. Denny Hamlin seems to be going after talent right now, and I'm not dissing Riley Herbst. I honestly do think he does deserve a cup ride. I question if Denny Hamlin believes that Riley Herbst is good enough to race in one of his Toyotas. That's the big selling point. Denny's always had the mentality of, let me go out there and find the talent, find the driver, and then I'll work everything out in the meantime. Corey Heim is also on the list to drive this third car over at 2311. I don't know. Corey Heim seems to be the hot guy right now in the truck series, but there's not a whole lot of talent in that series right now. No offense. It's not a competitive series right now. So I do think that he is a good driver, but I think it's a little bit like shooting fish in the barrel for him in that series. I'd like to see him get into the Xfinity series at least for a full season, or at least have more experience between Xfinity and truck before we throw him up into the Cup Series full time, potentially next year. Maybe 2 years from now, maybe that is the plan over at 2311. We're going to have to wait to see. over at Team Penske, one of the bigger Ford teams, Austin Cindric isn't signed for next year, but we're anticipating, especially with him making the playoffs this year, that he will be in that 2-car next year. I don't see any changes there. Ryan Blaney is signed through at least next year. Same with Joey Logano in the 22. No real changes over at Penske with those 3 cars. Now, RFK is a little interesting. We know Brad Keselowski is going to be in the 6 car until he decides he doesn't want to anymore, and we know that Chris Buescher is signed on through at least next year. Interesting to see if we're going to see a 3rd car running part-time down the road. They already said that they are not on the market for a charter right now simply because of the cost of it. So RFK, no real changes next year. Over at Trackhouse, however, we know that Ross Chastain in the 1 car is signed through at least next year, so no real change there. We know Daniel Suarez, with his Atlanta win, more or less signed his contract with Trackhouse to be in the 99 car, but it is not official yet. Now, we also know that they are picking up a charter from Stewart-Haas Racing. It hasn't been announced officially yet, but the question is which one of the Cup Series drivers gets this ride over at Trackhouse? You have Zane Smith, who is under contract with Trackhouse. The obvious answer is him jumping in this. We're not sure what the number will be, potentially 91, potentially 97, but we're not sure. However, Shane Van Gisbergen didn't move to the other side of the planet just to race Xfinity for 2 years. There's a lot of pressure for him moving up into the Cup Series with Trackhouse. If I had to put money on it right now, I see SVG jumping into this 3rd car over at Trackhouse full-time next year, and I see Zane Smith being farmed out to another team, potentially Kaulig Racing, to take over one of their 2 cars, either the 31 or the 16, more than likely the 16, but again, we have to wait and see what dominoes fall here, because I don't even think Trackhouse knows who they're putting in that 3rd chartered car next season full-time yet. RCR just made that big announcement that Andy Petrie was retiring, but let's be honest, he was fired due to poor performance. You don't retire mid-season when you're having a string of bad luck like they're having right now. So with that adjustment behind the scenes and some more changes presumably happening behind the scenes over at RCR, we know that Austin Dillon is signed through at least next year, so he will be in the 3 car despite rumors of him retiring and other drivers jumping in the 3 car. Kyle Busch also signed through at least next year in the 8 car. No real changes there. We're expecting to see the 33 running a handful of races next year with Austin Hill and other drivers jumping in it sporadically for the big races that pay, frankly, a lot larger. Stewart-Haas Racing might be shutting down, but Haas Factory Team is essentially being revived from the old Haas Racing that it was before Stewart-Haas. Now, we are not sure what car number they're going to stick with. 41 seems to be likely, but also 00 is on the table. Gene Haas is keeping one of those charters. Now, we're hearing that it could either be a Cole Custer jumping in. That's the obvious choice with Cole's not only Xfinity Series championship and his success, but the fact that his father is the general manager of Haas Factory Team. It more or less boils down to, do you want to go out there and actually compete for a championship and a playoff spot with Cole Custer, or do you want to take the money from Ryan Preece and go ahead and turn that into a pay car? It's honestly going to depend on what the budget looks like for this race team. It's coming out of Gene Haas's personal pocket, and let's be honest here, he is one of the wealthiest human beings on the planet right now, definitely one of the wealthiest in the NASCAR garage area. He can 110% afford to fund a Cup Series car himself, as well as 2 Xfinity cars with just the Haas logo on it, and I get the sense that he does want to have a presence in the Cup Series with the Haas brand. That is significant, so I'm guessing at least half the races will be Haas car, a Haas branded car on the racetrack for Haas Factory Team, but whether it's Cole Custer, whether it's Ryan Preece, we don't know. Saw some rumors that Noah Gragson could potentially stick around in this car, and I don't necessarily see that happening. There's going to be no support from Ford whatsoever from this team, and they're more than likely going to be racing Fords next year. So I do think that it's going to be a driver who's going to have to outrace his equipment, and I think Cole Custer can certainly do that. Ryan Preece, from what we've seen the last couple of years, not so much. Now, over at Front Row Motorsports, we found out Michael McDowell is jumping ship over to Spire Motorsports to drive the 71 car next year. We'll talk about Spire in a little bit, but let's talk about Front Row Motorsports. Right now, the 34 and a third team chartered car from Front Row Motorsports is without a driver. We know Todd Gilliland is signed in the number 38 car for at least one more year, and given how he's run the last few weeks, he is certainly starting to be the new leader over at Front Row Motorsports. Now, Cole Custer's name was thrown into the 34's pot before the announcement of Stewart-Haas Racing and Haas factory team. I don't necessarily see that happening now. It is a possibility, it certainly is, but I don't necessarily see Cole jumping ship from literally the company his father's running to, frankly, a rival organization. Potentially Front Row Motorsports and Haas factory team could work together in a technical alliance, so there could be that connection there, but even that doesn't necessarily guarantee that Haas factory team is going to have faster cars than Front Row Motorsports. They're a Tier 1 Ford team now, so they're getting a lot of support from Ford. They're looking for a new building. It was supposed to be the Stewart-Haas building, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen now with Haas factory team running out of that building. Cole Custer, like I said, was on the list, but now Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and Sam Mayer are all on the list for this one, as well as Christian Eckes. If I'm Front Row, I am very aggressively going after both Josh Berry and Noah Gragson to jump in my two cars, sincerely, because they've already in the Ford camp. Ford likes them. They are hot commodities. They are young up-and-comers, let's be honest here, and they frankly have been outperforming their equipment the last few weeks. And I do think that you want to nab these two drivers and bring them into the fold. You got Gregson, Berry, and Gilliland. That could certainly be a very potent team that can definitely get it done. I do think that Sam Mayer at some point deserves to be in the Cup Series. I just personally don't think he's ready yet, despite him winning so recently in the last 12 months in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It doesn't feel like he's 100% ready to go yet, but he will be very soon for the Cup Series. Now, speaking of Spire Motorsports, Corey LaJoie signed through at least next year. Carson Hocevar signed through at least next year for the 7 and 77, respectively. Michael McDowell coming over from Front Row Motorsports to the 71. It's going to be interesting to see, frankly, how the power dynamic works at this organization. Corey LaJoie is the guy who literally was one of the first employees over at Spire, and it was always his team until Carson Hocevar got there this year and frankly started outperforming him. Now Carson in the 77 is doing things that Corey in the 7 hasn't done yet, and he's looking a lot faster and a little bit more consistent. And now that you have Michael McDowell, frankly a veteran coming over there, Daytona 500 champ, playoff driver, you really have to look at this organization and say, how does the power struggle over there with these three drivers work? They're all three very, very talented drivers, and I get the sense that they're maybe a two-car team that's trying to be a three-car team right now as far as their resources and their competitiveness. And I do think that Michael McDowell going over to the 71 is certainly going to produce a lot of speed out of that car. At least it needs to. So it's going to be interesting to see what improvements are made during the offseason and into next year with Spire Motorsports. No real changes over at Legacy Motor Club and Toyota. John Hunter Nemechek signed through at least one more year for the 42. Eric Jones not signed on for next season in the 43, but we're anticipating that announcement coming down within the next few weeks. It feels like it's his car. If he were to leave, Corey Heim certainly would be on the short list, but it doesn't feel like Jones is going anywhere. Legacy absolutely loves this guy, and I feel like Toyota wants him there more than anybody else, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This team sincerely needs more respect than it's been given, especially given how one of their drivers has run this season. Rick Ware Racing. Justin Haley went over there. We all thought it was a joke, and now the kid is competing for top 15s on a weekly basis on speed, not strategy, not two tires, not staying out. It's 100% speed. Keep in mind, they have a technical alliance with RFK, and I do think that that is starting to pay dividends, and it's starting to feel more like a third and fourth RFK car that's out there out of Rick Ware, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Justin Haley is going to be back in the 51, despite the rumors that he's jumping over to the Wood brothers. He's not. He signed a multi-year deal. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be in that 51 car for years to come. Now, the 15, it's had a rotation of drivers. Kaz Grala is kind of the anchor driver this year, running 25 plus races this year. And I think it's time to go ahead and get somebody full-time in this car, and really, you got to look at this 15 like it's a potential playoff contender, and I'm being dead serious. Who fits the bill? Honestly, I don't know. If I'm Harrison Burton, I'm certainly knocking on the door because he's the guy who is over at Wood Brothers right now. He's not going to be back next year with the Wood Brothers. We already know that, but the question is where does Harrison Burton end up? I think that this 15 car would be a good fit for him simply because they do have a little bit of support from Ford, but more importantly, Harrison does bring a little bit of sponsor dollars with him, and that's never a bad thing, especially to Rick Ware, who frankly could use some more sponsor dollars. They're not exactly hurting, but there isn't a single race team on the grid right now that couldn't use more sponsor dollars. JTG Daugherty Racing, at least that's what it's called this year. It's going to be rebranded next year. We're not sure what it's going to be called next year. I don't think they know yet. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is signed through at least next season. Good for him, but they are losing their longtime sponsor, so I question what this organization is going to look like next year without those resources, and now that one of their owners is essentially jumping ship over to Gibbs, I question how long is this team really going to last and how competitive are they going to be. Their sponsor was their greatest asset, that and the Daytona 500 champ Ricky Stenhouse Jr. that happens to be their driver, and frankly, I think those were the two things holding this team together, and losing the sponsor. The question is can Ricky step up and really do a lot more with even little, the little amount that he's getting next year? I don't know. We're going to have to wait to see. Kaulig Racing is going through a reset this weekend, supposedly very fitting, but we know that Daniel Hemrick is not signed for next year in the 31. This ride's going to come down to sponsorship. It's who has the money to be in there. We're assuming Daniel Hemrick is going to go ahead and find that sponsor dollar and come back next year for the team. But I question it. This is an organization that is literally taking money right now from anybody who wants to give it, and Noah Gragson certainly could end up at this organization. I don't want to see him end up here because I do think that Noah is better than this organization. This organization is struggling. They're an offset of RCR. We could see Zane Smith in either the 31 or the 16 car next year. I think he's going to end up in the 31 on loan with the sponsor dollars on that 31 car, and the 16 will be the continued rotation of drivers with Daniel Hemrick, AJ Allmendinger kind of being the two guys that more or less split this ride. But again, we're going to have to continue to wait to see what happens over at Kaulig, and if frankly they can find some sponsor dollars and find some competitiveness, because they are clearly struggling right now. That leaves the Wood Brothers. Harrison Burton not signed for next year, not coming back next year. And there was a number of different sponsors that were kind of talking to this organization, and a lot of drivers were rumored to this organization. The big one was Chase Briscoe jumping over there, and I think that might have been the best kind of chance, the best thing that the Wood Brothers was necessarily counting on, and it just simply didn't happen. There's no way around it. He found a better offer and signed that deal. Hearing that Noah Gragson is having conversations with them, with Bass Pro coming over for a handful of races and Noah Gragson sponsorship dollars, that would be a good fit for the Wood Brothers. I don't necessarily think it would be a great fit for Noah Gragson. I think that him going over to Front Row makes a lot more sense for Noah, but I think that the Wood Brothers desperately need someone, and if frankly Noah Gragson doesn't sign with them, they honestly might bring back Harrison Burton for another year if they can't find somebody else who brings the dollar forward. Daniel Hemrick could be on this list as well if he transfers his sponsor dollars over to the Wood Brothers, and I don't think he's realized that yet. So we're going to see, frankly, what happens with this one. There's a lot of rides that are still in limbo and a lot of things that could happen down the road, but frankly, we're waiting for a couple of these dominoes to kind of fall into like their slots and see where everybody ends up. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about the silly season chart so far? Who do you think is going to be in the unnamed rides? Where do you want to see some of your favorite drivers end up next year, including Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, Harrison Burton, Daniel Hemrick? Frankly, you've got Shane Van Gisbergen on that list and Zane Smith, all unknown plans for 2025 officially at the moment, even though there's discussions happening. Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're there, make sure that you mash that subscribe button so that you do not miss a video. And of course, log on to arnrace.com for the latest motorsports news. ARN, the Motorsports Authority. That's going to go ahead and do it for me for Shifting Gears. I'm Alan Bailey. We'll see you at the track.